Hey folks, finally something super exciting to make a video about. Now we're going to get back in rhythm, I think. Today, I've been waiting patiently for all these parts to show up. And what are we going to do with all these parts? We're going to upgrade my servers. And that's not all that's getting upgraded. The cases are getting upgraded too. Take a look at this Silverstone stuff. 8-bay NAS in the front. And I've heard these have airflow problems sometimes, but I'm pretty sure if it's a direction problem with the air, I can just baffle that with cardboard or something. I can figure that out. I can't imagine this case being that bad. It was the smaller cases that I was seeing on Amazon that were also made by Silverstone that seemed to have those problems. So hopefully this one's okay. We'll see. I got two of them to replace these Leon Lee cases down here. I really like these cases, but unfortunately they have a problem where the front panel, the little pegs that hold the front panel in, are made of some of the most brittle plastic in the world and break off. And I thought about just getting more newer Leon Lee cases, but the newer Leon Lee cases have the same problem, so switched entirely over to the Silverstone stuff. So we'll see how good this is. The front bays I think are going to be extremely convenient, especially for upgrades, because one of my servers only has 4 drives in it. This has 8 bays in it, so it's got plenty of room for expansion. What else? Alright, so let's actually go over the parts that we have here. This is a bunch of stuff we've got. Let's start with the boards. A pair of ASUS Prime Rib, ASUS Prime B350M-A CSM boards. And the CSM is important because I want to be able to boot this using BIOS, because the boards I was using don't really support UEFI that well or correctly. So we're going to be using BIOS on these, and if I ever have to reinstall, I will just use UEFI at that point. But right now, BIOS should be just fine. Got an 8 gig kit of RAM. 1 stick is going to go into each, so it'll still be a 4 gig system. These are boxes of hard drives that store files. They really don't need much RAM, and if I need more RAM, I can add it later. This is not ECC RAM. This is your standard, bog standard PC4 2133 4 gig sticks. So, and I believe these processors only run that at 1866, I think. Or is that just the laptop chips? I can't remember, but we'll find out when we turn one of these on and see this in action. So let's go on to the CPUs. So I'm using the first APUs that AMD released on the Socket AM4 platform. That's what these boards are, by the way. They're Socket AM4. They're Ryzen boards, and they're part of the ASUS Corporate Stable Series. Forgot to mention that as well. So we're using these APUs. I know, as a server CPU, that seems a bit weird, doesn't it? We're going to be using these A10 9700E. They're 3.5 gigahertz with a 2 megs of cache, and with Radeon R7 graphics. These are quad-core chips that have a TDP of 35 watts. So they're extremely power efficient for being a quad-core, especially of its time. These came out before the Ryzen APUs did. But they're more efficient than the Ryzen APUs I could buy at the time. Turns out just yesterday, the day before I filmed this video, they announced the new Athlon Series to replace these. So it figures like a week after I buy these that they release something new. But honestly, using these older chips is probably better for Linux because the support will be there and it will actually work properly. Plus, on the server side, the performance isn't really as important for me because I don't push the servers as much as I do my desktop. These are basically file boxes. I think the most I would do with these is put maybe Plex on there. So I think these will do just fine. Plus 35 watts is nice. They're still an upgrade from the G9650 Pentiums I have, which are dual core. They use less power, are much faster, have better onboard graphics, which really isn't going to amount to a hill of beans, but it's just something to note. And they're generally a huge step up, and most importantly, they're not Intel. They're not really old Intel chips that are probably not going to be patched for the various vulnerabilities that have been found in them for a long time, whereas these AMD chips aren't susceptible to meltdown. They probably are to Spectre to some degree, but I think that might have been patched by this point, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. I also have 2 coolers behind here. I decided to get the Ryzen stock coolers because the stock coolers that come with these things, look at the size of the box. That stock cooler is going to be a hairdryer. In fact, we'll take a look at one just so I can... Yeah, see, look at this cooler. It doesn't even have the AMD logo on it. It's a cheap pile of junk. And it's just got squares of thermal paste on the bottom. But look how thin that is. That's pretty bad. And I would bet that this is a fairly loud cooler. I don't know how hot these get, or how loud this fan is. I mean, we could try it and see how it goes. But I don't know, man. I don't know. The chip itself looks fine, though. Just looks like your normal AMD chip. There you go. A10 9700E, socket AM4. So that's what this is the platform the servers are going to be based around. I have a feeling that this will work just fine. I expect to just drop it in and Linux will just boot without much of an issue. So what the real highlight of these upgrades are is less of this stuff, although this stuff I'm sure a lot of you will want to know about, but it's more the cases. I think the cases are the biggest upgrade to this whole thing, because they're going to allow much more convenience in server maintenance, especially with the drives. And it's just it's a NAS case in general, and I've wanted a NAS case for a while instead of one where I had to pull it out to get the drives out. I just find that kind of annoying, so that'll be replacing these two. Those Lee & Lee cases have had a damn good life. I've used them for years now, at least 5-6 years, so they've been around the block a while. I don't know if I'm going to get rid of them or not, because they're still in pretty good shape on the inside, apart from the front panels. But they're definitely not going to be used as server cases anymore, at the very least, so they're done from that. So I think we should I think when we build this thing, we should try this cooler just to see how bad it is. Or at least plug it in to see if it's loud or not. I don't know. I don't know if I trust it. But in case it's not good enough, I've got Ryzen coolers behind it, so yeah. So I'm going to build one of these, and we're going to take a look at it built, because they're both going to look pretty much the same, as they're both the same board, the same chip, the same everything. So I think the next thing we're going to take a look at is whether this cooler is useful or not. I'm really tempted to see. Alright, here's one of the boards, mostly put together. I decided to forego that stock cooler because I read up on that a little bit on Newegg, and one of the reviews said the stock fan is loud and ineffective. And I believed them, because if you remember years back, we built a system with Grateful 42. I think that was a bulldozer pile driver system. And we used the stock cooler on that, and it was a hairdryer. So this cooler isn't much thicker, but it's pretty effective. I've used these coolers on Ryzen R3 1200s before, which is also a quad core just like this is, and is a 65 watt chip, and it's handled the cooling no problem. So I think on this 35 watt chip it should do just fine. We'll of course take a look at the temperatures, but I think it'll do just fine, and it's a better quality fan anyway. These are the coolers that came with the Ryzen 5, some of the lower end Ryzen 5s and Ryzen 3s, at least in the first series that I know of. So this is the way these boards are going to be set up. Alright, got the first system built. Looking pretty snazzy, apart from all this cable mess, but there's really no room to cable manage in here, so I just kind of tucked everything together and velcroed it so nothing touches fans or what have you. So the inside of this case is pretty nice. It's got 2 fans here at the hard drive cage. It's got 1 fan in the back. I was able to turn the power supply upside down so it doesn't go through the bottom, because this is going to be on carpet. And that will also double as airflow for my HBA here. So that's always a good thing. I got mini SAS to SATA connectors coming off of that HBA going to all 8 hard drive bays. I've got my SSD mounted with 1 screw up top there. It's an 80 gig Intel SSD. I don't think you can really see it that well, but there's the blue SATA cable there. And got 1 4 gig stick of RAM in there, and I got the APU in there. So this should be together. I'd like to show you the hard drive cage though. So let me see if, did I lock that? Yeah, I did. Well, the good news is I can just use the keys that came with this to unlock that. So if I knew what I was doing, right? There we go. Front of this is all hard drive bays. There you go. Better lighting there. It's all hard drive bays. And what I can basically do is just take a drive out. Let's say I need to replace this drive. I can just pull it straight out. And there you go. There's all the 2 terabyte drives that I have in here. They screw into the caddies. No weird nonsense where you have to bend the caddy like hell to get the drive in. So you can put SATA or SAS drives in here, I suppose. I think in this model you just use SATA. And good stuff. And in this particular server, I only have 6 drives in it, so I can add another 2 at some point, which I probably will do. Not in a hurry, but eventually I will, when I feel like that's necessary. Front panel has, looks like a reset button in there. I don't know if I can even hit that correctly. Yeah, that might be a reset button. I'm not sure exactly what that is. There's the on button there. There's your front USB. There's your audio. Pretty simple case. And it looks very nice on the front, I think. So this is going to be nice having 2 of these. I've dismantled the other server and I've just put most of the guts into here. So what I'm going to do is boot this thing up and configure it so it boots into the BIOS. One thing I should mention is this card's in the graphics card slot. The hard drive controller, it's an 8X card. So yeah, fits perfectly in there. That's why I wanted the APU, so I didn't have to use a pixel pusher graphics card. So anyway, let's boot this thing up. Let's give it a first test, shall we? Let me put this, oh, there we go. We've got LEDs all over the board. So let me put the side panel back on and we'll boot this thing up. Okay, I have everything hooked up here. I think I just have to switch the source on the monitor to the analog input. There we go. So let's turn this on. I heard a beep. Let's go into the Uefi here. Okay, cool. It sees everything that it needs to see. New CPU installed. Hooray! So that gives us a chance to look at this. Alright, so that's the BIOS revision number. The board has a 2018 copyright on it. That's because this board has been updated to work with the Ryzen APUs. So it has a newer BIOS on it. The RAM is just your standard DDR4 2133. These chips, as it turns out, can go up to 2400. I thought it was 1866, but that's only the laptop ones. The desktop ones can hit 2400, but in this case, it's not going to matter. 2133 will be fine to drive the video to see a TTY, as you can see. This is pretty much what it's going to be doing if I ever use the video on it. So, yeah, let's head into the BIOS and configure this. Ooh, look at that. Isn't that fancy? Wowee. Alright, is there an advanced mode? Advanced mode's F7. Alright. There we go. That's what we want. This is more like a traditional BIOS. There you go. Alright, so what are we going to do here? We're going to memory frequencies, auto, yada yada yada. That'll be on auto as well. EPU. Let's use the low power mode. See what happens there. That makes the machine freeze. Oh well. Don't want TPM. What do we have here? IOMMU. I don't know if I want that on or not. I'll put it on auto, so it can decide for itself. Primary video device is integrated graphics. Buffer size is automatic. It can use whatever it wants. SATA, let's see. Smart self-test. Wow. So this supports hot plug, which is kind of nice. SATA 1 has the Intel SSD in it, the 80 gig one. CPU's running nice and cool right now. Hopefully it stays in the 30s and the 40s. That's kind of what we want. And boot. So we want fast boot disabled. Boot configuration. Alright. Advanced mode by default. Boot up numlock state. Whatever. CSM. Boot from, okay, it seems to all be on legacy only right now, which is good. So we'll do both UEFI and BIOS mode. Alright, let's see if it boots in, at least gets to the Debian bootloader here. And it does. Let's see if it boots successfully. What's it doing? Oh, the lights aren't even working. Wow. Oh, we might have a... No, we don't. We don't. We don't have a showstopper. Gonna get boot. There we go. Doot-doot-doot. You hear that? That's Open Media Vault starting up. Look at that. Look at all that. Look at the drive activity LEDs. That is pretty cool. I like that. That's really cool. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I think I need to reverse the polarity on the power LED though. So. I don't have a TTY for some reason. What if I auto adjust this? Alright. Might need to install some firmware or something. Let's see if I can ping the machine. Okay, I fixed the power LED here. Now this thing's up and running. I got it to boot. Turns out I needed no mode set on, so I'd probably have to install firmware for the graphics drivers. But speaking of which, I thought I'd point this out. I gave this thing 32 megs of video just now, and I gave it AC restore, so let's boot this thing, and I'll show you it working. It's a very quiet machine, very quiet. Alright, so I gotta edit this and turn no mode set on. There we go. No mode set. And do F10 to boot. And it gives me a bunch of crap at the beginning. And then eventually it will boot. Hear the drives spinning up. Won't be able to see the activity LEDs because this power LED is blinding. There, that's better. There you go, look at all those activity LEDs. Doopa-doopa-doopa-doo. Doo-doo-doo. And that means that Open Media Vault is working. I converted the server to Open Media Vault a couple months ago. By the way, it's basically a web interface that lets you control your server that way. So let me log in here. Okay, so let's see if I had to also reconfigure the network. I had to go into interfaces and undo some configuration where I had two Ethernet ports bonded together. So let's see if this actually works. Okay, what about... Can I get to the router? Network is unreachable. Yeah, I still got work to do to get this networking up, but I just wanted to show you that it boots. So I just need to fix a few things, fix a few quirks, and get this thing up and running. Okay, so I messed around with this machine a little bit more, and I got it working just fine. It turns out I had to screw with the network settings a little bit. The interface name had changed for the network card, so I had to go dig that up and then stick it into the interfaces file. So now this is back up, it's acting like a server again. The networking is functioning. The video is functioning, at least on DVI. On VGA, it doesn't seem to work with AMD GPU for some reason. Not really sure why. So I'm probably going to have to find, so I'm probably just going to have to use an HDMI switcher to look at the two servers, TTYs, if I have to. But hopefully I don't, and I can just remote in and it'll be all good. So this thing, I've been very pleased with it so far. I have it locked, as you can see. And been very pleased. These cases are built pretty well. Maybe not as well as you'd expect for the money, but still good enough that it's not much of a loss. And yeah, very happy. Very, very happy with these Silverstone cases. I am done with Lee & Lee for sure, because they've just skimped on their quality too much. In fact, I will throw a picture into the video demonstrating why the other cases are going to go. Actually, I can just show you that right here. You can see that's missing. And here's the other one. Just total garbage. If you can't see it that well, throw the picture in where you can see it. So yeah, I'm a lot happier with these cases, especially with the front hard drive bays. That's going to make life a lot easier. So that's essentially the overview of the hardware with this build. What I'm going to do for the second computer, as you can see now, is I'm going to basically make the same build, and I'm going to add 2 more hard drives and install Open Media Vault onto that as well. You can see I'm backing this up to this 6 terabyte drive on the floor there. So once that's backed up, I will build another one of these systems out of another one of these cases with the same exact parts. And in that video, I think we're going to take a look at installing Open Media Vault. And because it's a very cool program, and I think some of you who run home servers might get a lot of use out of it. It gives you a nice web interface to look at everything. So yeah, you might do that. I think that would make a great video. So I think we will do that once I have everything backed up and once I get around to installing it. So yeah, there you have it, folks. That's part 1 of this, which is this machine here, and this might be a 2-parter video, it might not. We'll see. I think I'm going to make it a 2-parter though, just because the installing Open Media Vault part might get a little involved. But this is essentially the hardware overview. It will be the same exact board, same exact chip, and everything. So no changes there, just more of the software side. So hopefully you guys enjoy that when that happens. Alright, it's the next day. This computer's all good to go. I reconfigured the networking, so that it works correctly. I installed Linux-firmware and Realtek firmware as well. So now everything with this hardware is up and running. I didn't have to reinstall or anything. Now, what I also did this morning is I put together the other machine, which is another one of these Silverstone cases. And this one's a little bit different. It's not using an HBM. It is using the ports on the motherboard, because this is the junk drawer, although it's becoming less junk every time I revise it. This particular machine is utilizing an IOCrest SATA card that uses I forget what the controller is on there. It uses an IOCrest card that has 2 SATA ports on it. I'm utilizing one for the boot disk, which is another Intel SSD. This has 6 hard drives in it. I only have the capacity for 6 because of the ports on the board. 2 of them are free, as you can see on the back plane there. Same power supply, same motherboard, same RAM, same APU, same everything. So what I'm probably going to do with this machine is have it boot from Uefi rather than BIOS, because that's just convenient. I don't have to reinstall or do anything crazy. So that's what we're going to do to this machine. And really, that process is not that exciting. So essentially, these are just going to be hard drive boxes. And this machine needs to have its RAID redone. I've backed up the data, and then I'm going to copy it back on, install crash plan and all that fun stuff. So what I think I might do in the future is do a video on setting up a server rather than do it to set up my own, because I kind of go through this as I go along, and not everything's quite as coherent all the time. So I think what we're going to do with my old server hardware is do some demonstrations and server scenarios with those just for fun. But I'd like to show you what I've done with my own personal servers, just, you know, for the record, and, you know, for fun. I like messing with server stuff. It's not very often that I change this stuff out or all that kind of thing, but I think it's very fun to put this stuff together and watch it work, because generally when it sits over there in the corner and does its thing, I just don't even think about it, and it does, and it works. So I think it's cool to look at this sometimes. So this computer, as opposed to the other one up there, is going to boot from UEFI. It's going to have less hard drives, unless, of course, I put another controller in here. And yeah, that's the other server. I'll show these running in action once they're all finished. So I'm going to reinstall Debian on here. I'm going to install Open Media Vault, and then I'm going to configure the RAID from Open Media Vault. And we'll get started. So bada bing, bada boom. Okay, it's many days later after we put both of these servers together and got it all working and all that stuff. So after the last segment, I just decided I wanted to get this project done because I was running out of time and all that fun stuff. So I discovered that there was an issue on these motherboards with booting from the native SATA. For some reason, it puts the drives that are on the native SATA controller of the motherboard rather than the H310 that I've put in both of these now, by the way. Both of these servers have PERC H310 cards in them. There was a problem where it would basically put all the drives in the controller in Linux ahead of the drives that are on the board. So if you were to install Linux, it would shove the SSD towards the end. But I found that it wouldn't do that if you had RAIDed boot devices. So what I've ended up doing is using SSDs in RAID 1 as a boot device. So this one's a bit janky. It's a 40 and an 80 rated together because it's all I had. I had another 80 gigabyte SSD, but that SSD actually went bad, believe it or not. So that SSD is I'm probably gonna run the shred command on that SSD and then throw it away because it's no good now that sectors are starting to go on it. But anyway, yeah, so the changes I've made, this is the junk drawer server that you're looking at, by the way. I made a few changes. I was originally going to use a J-Micron controller here that I had in the other server, but unfortunately, I was having those booting issues, so I thought I would just get a real H310 and use that instead. And that, of course, I had to wait another week to get that, so it's been a long process to put all this stuff together. So, but that's a benefit to this server anyway. Now I can use all 8 drive bays in this Silverstone case. I've had a chance to use these computers a little bit. These have made excellent server motherboards so far. Very, very quick, even with these APUs in them that aren't, you know, the highest end thing in the world. It's still fast enough for what I need. It'll be fast enough if I put Plex or something on one of these. I only have 4 gigs of RAM in each computer right now, so I can obviously expand that, as you can see by the slots there. I have 6 drives in each server now, which is nice. 6 drives are in the junk drawer as we speak. I'm going to upgrade both of them to 8 2TB drives so that we have parity of space between both of them, which will be nice. I like consistency like that. So after installing everything and using it, everything is working now. Open Media Vault is up and going. I have my RAID configurations all set up. I had to redo the RAID on this one to make it RAID 6, the junk drawer. And on the other server, which is over there now, all I had to do was, Open Media Vault just picked up the array, and all I had to do was mount it, so that was pretty easy. On this one I had to copy the files on using a combination of FileZilla and Midnight Commander, so that's a bit interesting. In the other server, I also converted that to a RAIDed boot disk setup, so I had to reinstall Debian on that and Open Media Vault and all that kind of stuff. I used two 120 gig SSDs as the RAIDed boot drives, which is probably overzealous for boot drives, but these drives don't cost much money these days, so you might as well just use them for that kind of thing. So experiences with this, with these Silverstone cases so far. Very, very nice case to work in. The metal isn't, you know, super high quality. It's something you'd expect out of like a $50-$60 case maybe. It's fairly it's sturdy enough that I'm not complaining at all. Everything mounts nicely. Didn't have any issues with that. This case is great. Like, I would highly recommend this case as long as you can keep the drives cool, because that's where its main flaw is. This particular case uses a hot swap tray for all the drives, as you can see by the back plane there. Having this type of tray in an ATX case like this actually makes the ventilation kind of an issue, because it's not front to back like it normally would be. The ventilation that you get over these hard drives is a little bit poor. It's not poor enough that the drives will fry, but it's poor enough that it might make the more OCD of you cringe a little bit. Drives tend to run in the 40s, I've noticed in this case. That's with 6 drives. I don't know about 8 drives yet. We'll see what happens when I decide to buy those drives, which probably won't be for a little while. But yeah, this server in particular, the junk drawer, is made up of a bunch of refurbished hard drives, so they tend to run a little hotter than the brand new ones I bought. And the highest, I'd say, is drive E. So that'd be, what, the 5th drive in this array? It gets up to about 48 degrees once temperatures are stabilized, which luckily is below the spec of the temperature where it's dangerous for most drives. As long as you're about 5 degrees under that, it shouldn't affect lifespan too much, I think. They're making drives with higher and higher temperature limits, 60, even 70 in some cases. But generally, I've researched online, and different studies show different ideas, different results. So the theory I'm going by is, if it's above 50 degrees, it's probably time to improve your cooling, because these are the fans that came with the case. They're not static pressure fans, which for a situation like this probably would benefit it just a little bit. It might drop it a few degrees or so. So we'll see what happens over time, but if these fans ever go, they're probably going to be replaced with high static pressure fans. I thought of that after the build we did with Grateful 42, how he used high static pressure fans for the radiators, I believe, on for his liquid cooling setup. So I could use that for this hot swap tray, and that would probably help a little bit, maybe. I'm not really sure, but otherwise, I'm very happy with these cases. I'm very happy with these setups. When drives go bad, I can just unlock the front here, open it up, and replace a drive. Life is pretty good. Now, you've heard me talk about software like Open Media Vault and Plex and things like that. I think in the future we should do videos about how to set that all up. I've already made a video about how to choose different server hardware and things like that, and it was a bit amateurish, but it got the point across. I think the software is really where a lot of the utility comes in. The server is just there to run the show. And you need the hardware to be able to handle what you throw at it, and that's the most important part. And that's what I have here. But I think we should take a look at some of the software you can use to utilize these servers. Open Media Vault is a very nice one. Webmin is a nice web interface tool as well. Plex is endlessly useful. Let's say if you have a collection of DVDs and VHSs and you've ripped them all and you want to put them in a central place where you can just watch them sort of on demand in your house or out on the go or whatever. Plex is really awesome for that. There's a bunch of stuff to talk about in here, so I think as far as software, we'll get to those in some future videos. I have some other hardware stuff, some new, some old to cover. This is some of the new stuff. I don't know how much other new stuff I have to cover. I have some new stuff actually that we can talk about, so we'll get to that. And this has been a server upgrade. I'm sorry to not be more detailed about this, but time kind of got away from me and I had to get this project done. So essentially what happened is we upgraded the motherboards to a new platform, changed cases to one with some hot swap trays in the front and a back plane. We're now booted. The boot drives are now 2 SSDs in RAID 1. The hard drives in both servers are in RAID 6 now, using MD RAID and Linux. We're using Open Media Vault as the management tool, and PERC H310s as the HBA for these servers. Basically, you can turn these cards into HBAs if you flash them with the right firmware. And that's what I did with these. So there you go. I'm going to put these servers back in commission and continue to use these as both my main file server and sort of my junk drawer hard drive box storage thingy. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I've got a few more coming down the pike soon now that life seems to be a little bit more stable, and we will get to those. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and have a good one, everybody.